Welcome back to another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Today, I have one of our most requested guests. His name is Lawrence King. Lawrence, how's it going, man?
It's going great, my friend. Very pleased to be here. Big fan of your account on Twitter, and for those that requested me, thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. Where are you calling in from today?
At the moment, I'm living in Asuncion, Paraguay.
Yes, so you're very famous for being based up in Paraguay and also in Uruguay and touting the benefits of these countries. For people that don't know about you, you're probably one of the legends of money Twitter. You're a Udemy professor with over 17,000 students. You're the owner of Raging Bull Coffee, a great coffee brand. Tell the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I mean, you've pretty much hit it in a nutshell there. But in another nutshell, when I first started making money on the internet back in 2012, I didn't feel comfortable giving half my money to the government. Maybe if they wanted 10, 20%, we could have negotiated something, but half was a bit too much. So I discovered that I could move to a tax haven, and I did just that in 2013. I moved to Uruguay when they just freshly opened their new tax benefit system for foreign entities,
Mhm.
and I moved there. I've been living in South America ever since. It's my favorite place in the whole world. I mean, everything you could ever want is in South America, whether it's tropical beaches, lakes, sea, mountains, anything that you want, cold, hot, tropical, whatever you want, you've got it here. So it's definitely one of my favorite places in the world. And I was a very big fish on Amazon, was one of the biggest supplement sellers between 2012 to 2018. And then got into social media and agency based stuff over the last 4 or 5 years. And I grew a Twitter following, God knows how. I did that, but I managed it somehow. And that's pretty much it, really.
Yeah, it's a hell of a story, and you've done a couple podcasts before. They're hard to find, but they're out there, and so I don't want to do a rehash of that. But I think it is valuable for people to kind of get your whole timeline because it's something that is hard to demonstrate in over Twitter. But maybe you could just run us through kind of how you went from I guess the decision to move out of your house at 16 and then from Italy to Venezuela to China to Vietnam and then to Latin America.
Okay, well, I always knew as a child growing up in the UK, I always knew something was wrong because I thought the rest of the world can't, the weather can't be this bad, the food can't be this bad, the lifestyle can't be this bad, essentially. Do you know what I mean? Especially as a man. As a woman, I think you have a bit of an easier time in the UK. As a man, it's one of the worst places, really. I would say for quality of life. You live to work. You don't see the sun hardly ever. Dating life is not great, especially if you're a man. And I always felt it was something wrong. Even at a very young age, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, I thought this isn't right. And I remember I used to go to friends' houses who were, foreigners, Italians, Greeks, and their mother would look nice. She'd wear a nice dress. She'd cook this incredible meal. And I thought, there's something more out there, isn't there? There's got to be. And I went when I was 8. I got essentially kicked out the home as they do in the UK and America. It wasn't that my dad's a bad person. It's just that culturally is very normal, which I think is shocking. But
Hmm.
it's very normal in the UK and USA to kick the kids out 16, 18. I think a lot of parents fall for the meme that they're doing their kids a favor when in reality all they're doing is putting them behind 5 to 10 years because they're going to have to pay rent and be in so much debt and work a low paying job that it takes them so long to actually get where they could be if they just had the right support at home. So again, that's not a criticism of my dad. That's just socially a normal thing where I come from, right?
Hmm.
Um, not definitely. I had a I've got a great father, so not doing the whole sort of woesy me spiel there. Um, from there, I went to Italy with a backpack at 18, and as soon as I arrived, I knew I was correct. The women were way more attractive, the food was better, the sun was out, and I thought, yes. The UK is not normal. So I decided that whatever it would take, whether it meant sleeping in the streets or teaching English or whatever I had to do, I was going to stay in Italy and I was not going to go back to the UK. And I didn't go back to the UK apart from the odd visit after that point.
Hmm. And you did some modeling in Italy, which is where it all where your career as a handsome man kicked off.
I did, yeah. I was fortunate, handsome man card. And also, I don't know if you remember the film Twilight. Do you remember that film?
Hmm.
I looked just like the vampire. So I had loads of modeling gigs for that. Vampire related club nights. Clothing brands wanted like vampire looking guys, like tall, skinny, long hair, very pale. So I had a lot of work. And then what happened was the second film came out, and it was the wolf. They wanted the wolf now. They didn't want the vampire anymore. So my work went straight down. I was gone. I was my work didn't dry up, but I certainly wasn't working as much as I had been during the peak of the Twilight era. But it was a fun time for sure.
And were you in like a modeling house or something with like bunk beds?
No, no, I just got called for gigs. And very often it was very popular back then for clubs to do like vampire themed nights. So they would want me to model for the poster of the club,
Hmm.
or clothing brands. Were kind of had that sort of vampire look. So they would hire me for that. I was not a big time model by any means, and once the Twilight stuff dried up, I became those budget models on AliExpress and things like that. I became one of those in China.
Wait, but that's skipping ahead because from Italy you went, from my understanding, you went from Italy straight to Venezuela.
Wow, you really did your research. Yes, that's correct. Yes. So when I was in Italy, I got promised a job teaching English in Venezuela. And when I went there, I was a very young guy. I found out that there was no job for me. So I was sat in like a square, and I saw this guy. He had like a problem with his legs, and he was selling juice, and he was selling non-stop juice. Right? It was like I guess it would be like Kool-Aid in America, that sort of stuff. The stuff that it's not juice. The sort
It
of
was it
powder
was
you.
Canya cane juice.
No, that's what I sold. Yeah, but this guy was
Yep.
selling.
Okay.
This guy was selling like I don't know what it would be in America. Like Kool Aid, where you put
Right. Was it the
the
icy one, Raspado?
like the powder. The powder they put in Tang.
Okay.
Tang it's called.
Okay.
So he was selling this anyway, and I saw him doing that, and I thought, okay, I need to do something because I don't. I'm not in a position where I can call my dad and get help, so I have to figure something out. And I saw he was selling this Tang, and I thought I could sell something. And I was renting a small apartment, and the guy had a cane juice machine. The guy who owned the house, and I said to him, "Could I rent that?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I rented it, and he said, "I'll even help you go get the cane." And I thought, if he can sell juice, I can sell juice. So I sat on the main street, 22 years old, roughly, selling cane juice in Venezuela. And that was kind of like my first ever business. That was when I realized if you just sell what people want and you are in front of these people, you will make money.
Yep. And I heard that this was on the Carretera Nacional, which is like the highway. Was this in Caracas or another city?
No, I was in Barinas. I was in the city of Barinas. So I was just,
Okay.
yeah, sat on the Carretera Nacional, no t-shirt on, just selling juice all day. And people would stop their cars just to talk to me and figure out why I was even there in the first place. And I honestly, in those times, the dollar was like 6 with the believer. It's like God knows what it is now. And I was probably making 50 to $100 a day, which in Venezuela, especially there, was big money.
Hmm.
And one thing I learned doing that, selling that juice, I realized that people always have a perception. Like that meme that says, "Oh, if you don't," the teacher tells the students, "If you don't study, you're going to end up like this guy," and the guy is a construction worker making like six figures.
Hmm.
A lot of people would come to my stall and talk to me like I was broke because I was selling something. And I realized then that everything really is perception. If you're seen selling something, people think you're broke. Broke people think you're broke. You know what I mean? Oh, he needs to sell something. Oh, he's selling in the street. He must be broke. When really I'm making a lot more money than the average person.
Yeah. And Lawrence, I want to go through just like the timeline of how you went from country to country because you did a bunch of very drastic moves. And then after that, we can come back and kind of double click on things because I know we only have kind of like an hour here. So, how did you go then from, I think, basically from Venezuela directly to China?
So I went from Venezuela back to Europe for a little bit. Um, Things started getting a bit difficult. Things were a bit difficult under Chavez, and I went to Europe, and then from there, I got an offer to do modeling again in China. So I went to China, and I lived in China for about a year, year and a half.
And you said again, was that like your second time in China?
No, that's the first time. I
Okay.
went to Europe
Okay.
again,
Okay.
and then first time to China.
Got, gotcha. And then from China on, so you're doing the modeling. I want to double click on all these things, but I do want to run through the timeline. And then you got to Vietnam. You met Adrian, your mentor in Vietnam. Tell us
That's
about
correct.
that.
So yeah, I was in Vietnam and I was struggling financially. I wasn't doing so well. I was just doing bits and pieces to survive. I was 24, 25 at this time. So really I got into online business quite late. Back then there wasn't really, it wasn't like now. I mean, these 20-year-olds are so lucky. I really hope they realize how lucky they are. They can literally go on Twitter and find all these different business opportunities and people making money that it didn't exist back then. So if you were going to get into online business back then, you really had to know somebody who knew somebody that was doing something, and then they had to want to tell you.
Hmm.
It was a completely different ball game. And I rented a house for this guy from the UK. He was in his 60s. His name was Adrian, and I did a good job negotiating the deal because I would do bits and pieces like that just for extra cash. So I negotiated his rental and got commission. And he called me up and he said, "Can we talk? Can we go out for coffee?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Oh, I'm making $20,000 a month on Amazon, and I need a young person's help because I've got loads of things to do. The business is taking off." And this is funny because I see this a lot on Twitter. I was broke back then, so when he told me that he made 20,000 a month, I'm sure you can guess what my first reaction was.
Damn.
Well, yes, but then I also thought, no, you're not. Nobody makes 20 grand in a month. That's impossible. Because that's how broke people think, right? They don't
Hmm.
they've never seen it, they've never been around it, so they don't believe it's possible. You see that a lot on Twitter. When you see someone on Twitter or social media say, "This guy never make he doesn't make 10K a month," it's because 10K a month is like a lot of money for them. So it's kind of like it shows in your outlook. So he told me, and I thought, oh, there's no way he makes 20 grand a month. And he said, "Look, I want to employ you, but I was already had a job." He said, "I need you to work nights because we sell in the USA. So you're going to have to, you know." And I said, "Yeah,
Night
sure. Okay."
shifts.
So I had to work double shifts basically, yeah, with him. And then I saw his business and I realized, oh, this guy actually genuinely does make 20 grand, more than 20 grand a month. And
Hmm.
very quickly, we went from 20,000 to like 250,000 a month together. And my life changed from there. That was Venezuela. Selling juice was when I realized, oh, I can actually sell stuff and make more than a job. Good. And then Vietnam was when I realized, oh, you can actually make tons of money on the internet. You can sell things that people want to buy and make tons of money.
Hmm. And what city in Vietnam were you in at that time?
I was in Ho Chi Minh City.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, take us from there, kind of how you went from Vietnam to Latin America.
So with Adrian, we grew this business out and my salary went up. So for the first time, I was making six figures. I was 26 years old and I was making six figures for the first time ever. And unfortunately, one day he woke up, he had a tumor and he moved to Thailand because Thailand has some of the best hospitals in Asia. And we both moved into the hospital together because he was in like a five-star hospital, sort of like a five-star hotel room.
Hmm.
and we worked on the business together. And I stayed there with him until he passed away. And when he passed away, his wife was going to continue the business. And I spoke to her and she said, "Yeah, no problem. Everything's going to be fine. I know we owe you quite a lot of money. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry." And I said, "Okay, well, in that case, I was only really sticking around for Adrian. I'm going to move to Uruguay because I want to fix my tax situation." And she said, "Yeah, no problem. Don't worry about it. We got you, all the rest of it." I go to Uruguay. I do a month of work and then the payments don't come through. And she says to me, "Oh, don't worry, everything's going to be okay." And then I wake up one day, I'm blocked. I'm blocked from the Amazon account. I'm blocked from PayPal. I'm blocked on Skype. I'm blocked on everything, right? So that was when I realized, oh, I'm in big trouble here. I need to figure something out. And I didn't have that much money really in the swing of things for someone with no income that's just moved to a new country, paid for a lease, bought furniture, all that
Hmm.
stuff. Because I thought in my mind that everything was going to be okay. And I was starting from zero again.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize how that situation ended up.
Yeah. So from there, I basically thought, okay, the only thing I know that I can do to make money is Amazon. So I'm going to use all the funds that I have and I'm going to launch a supplement company. And I launched a supplement company on Amazon again, started in Europe and then eventually went to America. And I got down in my bank. I remember I got down to minus £4,500. And I remember one month I had to choose between paying the electricity or paying what we have here in South America, which is the communal expenses for buildings, because I didn't have enough to pay both.
Hmm.
And it was 2000, end of 2013, I had my breakthrough month where I managed to walk away with like 20,000 profit. And then from there, I just had a great run on Amazon for a few years where I was just one of the first people to be involved in the supplement industry and be able to ride that wave. And I managed to make sure that everything was okay from there on. It was literally make or break. I was so close to not making it, like really, really close. And it was like a huge wake up call for me because I'd gone from being broke to working with Adrian, making six figures, making this money, to being basically broke again, where I would go into a supermarket and hope my card would get passed. And
Hmm.
I just told everyone that I was moving to this tax haven because I'd made it and I was successful now. And here I was in a supermarket in Uruguay hoping that my card would get passed for a $10 purchase. You know what I mean? So it's very it can happen very quickly either way. You know, you in a couple of months can really make the big difference whether you're going up or down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard that basically what happened was your accountant, like, you had the tax bill come in, you had to give your 45% to the queen,
Yep.
and your accountant, what did he tell you, and how, and what action did you take that basically, yeah,
So
tell us about
basically,
that.
I was when I was in Vietnam, I was still registered in the UK. So they wanted some of my money because for the first time I'd started making money and I'd never paid tax before because I'd never really made that much. So I got an accountant and he said as a joke, "Oh, well, if you don't want to pay this stuff, you can move to, I don't know, Uruguay." And that was about a month before we'd started working together about a month before. And then when he told me that like on a Sunday. I don't remember the exact days, but a couple of days later, I was in Uruguay. Like he told me that on like Sunday and via email, and then Thursday I was there. And I said, "Okay, I'm in Uruguay. What do I do now?" And he said, "Man, you're really crazy. You are really crazy." And he said, "There's nothing I can do for you. You need to get a very good local accountant that can help you set up your business and all the other stuff. But yeah, in a couple of months' time, you'll no longer need to pay the UK tax."
And so we're recording in Q4 2022. When was it that you first arrived in Uruguay?
So it was 2013, probably mid 2013, around that time.
And my understanding is that Uruguay has a 10-year tax break. And so you must be sort of approaching the 10-year mark. Is that sort of why maybe I'm guessing you started moving some of your operations to Paraguay to sort of because is Uruguay sort of winding down for you? Had a good run, but
No, for me, Uruguay is number one. And luckily, I've been able to fix it with my accountant where I left for 2 years. I went to Chile
hmm
and then I came back. So that took it gets recounted again. They've managed to fix that for me. So I'm not worried about the time frame
hmm
because everything is fixable. That's one thing you start learning when you do leave your country and you move to a tax haven and you change your situation. You realize that everything's fixable. And it's normally only for the top 1% that everything's fixable. But when you change country, you realize, you can fix stuff the way you want it to. So that Uruguay will always be my base because their banking is just phenomenal. I have
hmm
moved large amounts of money with no problems, no issues, safe, very good banks, all the mainstream banks, and I prefer that. The reason I'm in Paraguay is because I met my girlfriend here. We're having a child together, and this is just a very good base for living. It does have tax benefits as well, um, but for me, I personally, for the tax stuff, I prefer Uruguay.
Makes sense. You just value the stability and all that.
Yeah, it's what I know as well. I've been doing it for so long. I know the entire process. I know when the tax season ends. I know exactly what to do, and it's just what I'm comfortable with. I find that the life in Uruguay is not as fun as other countries. It's a small country with a very small population, very good people. Don't get me wrong, but there's just not as much stuff there. There's not as much restaurants, things to do. So it's not as
hmm
much fun as say Paraguay or Brazil or Argentina. So it's a very good base to sort of do some deep work and be a tax resident.
Absolutely. And we are going to get into that. I was talking to the OG Vance, who's in Asunción right now, and I asked him, I said, what should I ask Lawrence when I get him on the podcast? And he said, well, Lawrence is one of the only guys that's really spent significant time living in Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Chile, Argentina. You've lived in all of them, like at least 6 months or a year in basically everywhere in the Southern Cone, right?
Yeah, I've lived in Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, Paraguay, Chile, Uruguay, and Brazil.
And so, yeah, I definitely wanted to come back to the Venezuela thing, but I had and I also want to do a deep dive a little bit on your perspectives on different countries. But I had a couple questions. So one theme I noticed was that you really did like burn the boats, drastic moves every single time. So it was UK to Italy, which is reasonably drastic, and then Italy to Venezuela, which is a huge move. And then, you went home for a bit, but basically Venezuela to China, which is an enormous move. China, Vietnam, and then Vietnam to Uruguay, which is another enormous move. So, what's kind of your philosophy on burn the boats and yeah, I mean, doing big things.
That's a really great question. To be honest, there, I would say mess up as much as you can in your 20s. Take those risks in your 20s because who cares? If I sold cane juice in Venezuela, some people for a year, some people might look at that as a wasted year. I don't because I learned a lot of skills and I got to, get a base on Spanish. But you can waste a year in your 20s. You can make a mistake. You can move to the wrong country. You can take the wrong possibility, and it's fine. There's nothing, you learn from it. If it goes wrong, you just learn. When I went to Venezuela and I didn't actually have a job lined up that I thought I did, I just learned. I learned tons of stuff. So you can't really lose in your 20s. The problem is when you get into your 30s, like me now, if I wanted to randomly go to China for no reason, I would look like a loser. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? People would be like, "Who's this? Who's granddad over here? What's he doing? Why is he? Do you know what I mean? Why is he taking a few $100 modeling gigs to pay the bills?" So, you know, do that stuff in your 20s and burn the bridges. Absolutely burn the bridges. No way
Burn the
back.
boats. Don't burn bridges, but burn boats.
Yeah, burn the boats. Yes, yeah, you're right. But burn the boats so that you can basically go, I have to make this work. I have to learn the language. I have to do this. And I think that's one of the reasons why most people never get their online business off the ground because they don't burn the boat at all. So they just treat their online business like it's some sort of plus, some sort of bonus, some sort of, oh, one day, like the lottery almost. They don't really treat it like. So when you move to another country and it's you have to make this work or you don't eat and you're going to be homeless in some other country where you don't even speak the language, there's a lot of pressure to either make or break.
Hmm. So, and you said you were in Barinas, Venezuela, which I'm looking at a map. It's kind of near Merida, but it's extremely far from it's extremely inland. Like that is, you definitely were like the only gringo there at that point in time.
I was, yeah. Well, there were a lot of Italians. A lot of Italians had gone there in the 80s and 90s. So there were quite a few Italians. But yeah, I was the only sort of, I guess, gringo. Even
And
even though, even
what
though
made you stay in Venezuela? Like, because I guess you could have been like, it didn't work out. I might as well just take the bus and maybe make my way to Medellin or something more comfortable.
I think it's a pride thing because I told everyone that I was moving to Venezuela and I had this great English teaching job. And very much the same when I moved to Uruguay. I told everyone I was doing really well with my job and I was going to move to Uruguay to be tax free. And then the next thing you know, I'm struggling again and I brought it back. I managed to make it. But I think it's important to stick things out because if you're one of the kind of people that goes, oh, it's difficult and you just run, you're going to run every time.
Mm.
If you can, if it's character building. If at 22 years old I could go to a very unstable country and make it work, then everything becomes easier after that.
Yeah, that's a good philosophy.
And I
Yeah, it leads me
definitely
to a
think
question because it. Go ahead with your thought.
I was just going to say as an extra point, that's why it's so important to suffer and fail in your 20s.
Definitely. So it sounds like the motivating factor around a couple of your moves was because you had told people at home your plans and you wanted to, make them proud. One question that I'm going to ask on every single podcast episode going forward, I really like it, is have any of your friends actually visited you, or whatever happened to like your high school UK buddies?
That's a really great question. So, I mean, one thing I started noticing around 20 years old was that a lot of my friends, or even 19, 18, they were going to university, or as you would say in North America, college. And I would watch them come back on summers and things like that, and they were all they were going rapidly downhill because a lot of people become alcoholics at college. It's basically just one big excuse to party. You turn up for these classes and then you leave it maybe with some sort of degree that might be useful. And I
Mhm.
looked at them and I thought the way they're going and the kind of lifestyles they're living, they're going to be toast by the time they're 30. And I thought I have to do something different. I really do. Do you know what I mean? And I have to break this somehow. And my friends all laughed at me through every bit of the journey. And now, especially with the last 2 years, and obviously we can't go too much into that, they all say to me, "You were right."
They finally get it.
They finally get it. But the problem is, most people wake up too late, and they wake up in their early to mid 30s with two kids, with a wife that they'd never wanted to be with in the first place, and their whole life revolves around going out on Friday night, Saturday night with the boys and getting as drunk as they can to forget their existence. And that's something I wanted to avoid.
And for the Lawrence King fans, I believe you're from London, or where do you want to shout out maybe your specific neighborhood or where you're from in the UK?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Wandsworth, London, is where I'm originally from.
Okay, and where is that exactly?
Well, it's. I mean, for you, I guess it's not too far away from Wimbledon. Do you know Wimbledon?
Only from tennis.
Okay, so it's not too far away from there. Not the best neighborhood in London, but not the worst either. Probably when I was raised there, it would be considered a lower middle class neighborhood.
So it's London. You grew up in one of the centers of world, culture and commerce. Maybe some of your friends made it to into the finance sector, into the city of London. Maybe some of them are plumbers. I guess you're in your mid 30s now, so you've seen a lot of different trajectories. Um, yeah, we're like trying to find a question, but it's interesting when you because I also am from a financial capital city, and I think people from financial capital cities they have a different opportunity cost because you could just go home and work in the city of London or something like that, whereas if you're from Ohio or whatever it is, you pretty much have to get out, you know.
Yeah, yeah, essentially yes, but it's changing now a little bit with the online world. But yes, I would agree with that statement.
And oh, and one other thing is your dad. You mentioned offhand that your dad is of Scottish descent, or maybe he's actually Scottish.
Yes, my dad is Scottish, yeah, from Glasgow.
He's from Glasgow, and so I guess in some way he was an immigrant too. Do you feel a connection to Scotland?
I love Scotland. It's a great country. I haven't been back in a long time. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, my dad moved down from Scotland to London to try and get a better life, and then I left London to go to a tax haven to have a better life. So that's why I never begrudge anybody for making the move or trying to change things, because we all are doing that most of the time, whether we realize it or we don't. And I definitely think now it's getting to the point where the world's changing. The Germans and the Brits and many other countries from Europe are now coming in mass amounts of immigration is happening from Europe to South America, and everything's a cycle.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's probably hit the inflection curve. Would you agree? Where Latin America is finally starting to make sense again, even for ambitious people.
Yeah, I mean the thing is Europe has failed a lot of its people, especially West Europe. You live in the UK now, and the government is talking about raising taxes when they're already taxing the middle class 40%. And people like me, we're in the 45% tax bracket, so I have to work 5 months of the year to be able to pay the government, and then after I've done that, I have to figure a way to pay 4 or 5 thousand pound rents in London if I want a house. Do you know what I mean? It's just not viable anymore for a lot of people, and I think that Europe has been living off its past for a long time, and a lot of people are starting to wake up now to the fact that it's not. We have a lot of good, especially North America and West Europe. We have a lot of amazing self marketing. You're so lucky. This is the land of the free. Everywhere else is garbage. Everywhere else is dangerous. Not here. It's great. Pay your 50% tax so you can have free healthcare. you know, and people fall for that, and they don't realize that actually there's a lot of stuff out there. And I remember on my first ever Brazil vlog, I filmed a supermarket, and I got 5 comments on Twitter under the video saying, "I didn't know Brazil had supermarkets." And I thought, wow, you guys really, a lot of people need to travel more. They really do.
Hmm. And I think you've had a lot of the same realizations that I've had while traveling. You've mentioned a couple of them before, certainly in your tweets and in previous interviews about families being more together. You've learned different family dynamics. You've what are some of your biggest epiphanies that you've learned while traveling?
Well, first off, was this is going to sound a bit strange, but people that have traveled will know what I'm talking about. The first off was a cleanliness thing. So in a lot of countries, they don't wear shoes in the house first off, and then they wash after they go to the bathroom, which is not something that you do in North America or the UK. It's not. And that was like a big, oh wow, people live that way. And that's one of the best things about traveling. You learn very quickly what people do. The next thing was family constructs. So I was kicked as soon as I told my dad I didn't want to study. I was out the house, which is normal in the UK, normal in the USA. It's either study and stay or get out and go get a job, because they think they're helping the children. They think they're doing them a favor and they're going to be independent. Most children just end up treading water for 5 to 10 years because they can't get a good paying job. So they end up working for minimum wage, and then they have to pay somebody else's parents' rent. It's really silly. So I realized in other countries they didn't kick their kids out. And then I realized there was a happy medium, because in some countries they'll literally say to their kids, "Oh, stay here till you're 50. Who cares?" And then in the UK they're going, "You're 16. Get out." So some happy medium is what I will do with my kids for sure. And then I
Hmm.
also realized as well in the UK, as soon as your parent or the person that raised you, the person that raised you is considered a nuisance or something difficult, the person that literally carried you for years of your life is a bit difficult. They kick them out in the UK and they send them to a home where they've got 5 TV channels and white bread sandwiches, like that's some sort of life. If you do that because you physically have no option, they need care or something. Fair enough. If they're just a bit of a nuisance and you're kicking them out, unbelievable, shocking. And I realized in Vietnam, I genuinely with my eyes would see people carrying their elders over across rivers and stuff on their back. And I thought, that's how it's done. That's what I'm going to do with my dad. I'm going to take care of my dad until he's gone, because that's what they deserve. Your parents did a good job for you, got to do it back for them. And we don't do that in the UK or the USA. It's really shocking.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really like our mutual friend Dylan Madden, previous podcast guest, would talk a lot about retiring his mom, which is a super honorable thing that is just not on people's radar at all. And it really should be more so to take care of your parents.
Absolutely. That's why I brought my
I,
dad over. That's why I retired my dad and brought him over. I've had him on salary since 2014 because he was living a life in the UK where it looks normal to him, but from the outside, you can see how sad it is. The classic 9 to 5, the GMO garbage food in the UK, never seeing the
Mhm.
sun, coming home to his girlfriend, Big Susan, that he didn't even like, but he's with her because he's got no option. Do you know what I mean? The nagging, the moaning, the whinging, the complaining, sitting in his car for 30 minutes before going into the house because he knows he's about to have an argument. All that stuff seems normal when you're in the UK. And when you leave it, you very quickly realize it isn't. So as soon as I got him on salary, he lived a couple of years in the UK, and I said, Dad, I need you to come out. And he goes, oh, and eventually agreed. And he said, I'll come out to Uruguay for 3 months and then I'll fly back and I'll do 3 months, 3 months. He came in 2016. He has not been back once. Not
That's
once.
crazy.
Yeah. Has no desire to. He's living a life of luxury in Argentina. I've got him taken care of financially. He's got a nice villa with a swimming pool. He spends his days doing whatever he wants to do, and that's exactly what he should be doing for the rest of his life.
One of the questions on Twitter, because we asked before this episode questions for Lawrence, and one of them was, "Can we get an update on what has become of Big Susan?" And I didn't get it, but I think I get it now. But tell us a little bit about Big Susan.
So my dad had a girlfriend who was just, I mean, it's literally like the most TV series thing you could ever have. Just the classic. She was an Irish woman. She was like Northern Irish, which is still part of the UK.
Hmm.
Very angry, burly, big, strong woman. She could probably wrestle a bear. If you're at a picnic and a bear comes along, I would put my money on Big Susan. I reckon she'd take the bear. And she basically just dominated my dad's life. And it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, your dad being dominated by a woman called Big Susan. But at the same time, I get DMs from guys all the time in their 40s and 50s. And they
And they
say, hey,
relate.
hey, my friend, like, thank you for sharing your dad's story. It really helped me. I'm in the same position. I'm sleeping on the sofa. My girlfriend has told me that I don't want to go. She doesn't want to sleep with me anymore, and I'm in the doghouse all the time, and I get treated like shit, and I get no respect at home. And I see a lot of guys in the UK, especially, in that position. And my dad's story, as uncomfortable as it might be sometimes to share, if that wakes up one or two people and saves their lives, and they end up improving themselves and changing their situation, then that's worth it for me.
And I know you've been getting a lot into high ticket closing recently, working with Rogue Wealth and others. And one thing that you said that struck a chord with me is that the best way to sell is through storytelling.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And also, massive shout out to Rogue Wealth. He is the one that took me from a decent salesperson to a very good salesperson. He runs a program called the Dojo. I highly recommend anybody who's here to check that out, because he's the guy that I make a lot of money now on the phones, much more than I used to, and it's thanks to him. So definitely a big shout out for him. And yeah, the best way to sell is by storytelling. And if people can see that story and think, oh my God, I'm in that same position Lawrence's dad is in. I get DMs all the time. What did your dad do? How did he do it? So he was with Big Susan for 10 years, just controlling his life. And then one day, I said to him, come over to Uruguay. And he'd had enough. And he woke up, he did his suitcase, he sat it down, and he said, listen, I'm I'm leaving, because it was a real miserable relationship, the sort of dominant where the woman leads and the man does everything she says, and it's never enough. And he's constantly saying, I'm just trying to make her happy. I'm just trying to and she's never happy. It's never enough. And he just went, sold his car at nearly 60 years old, and then flew out to Uruguay, flew out to Argentina, and then moved to Uruguay with me.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And so you've been traveling with your dad to different countries and for quite a few years now. And I was just curious, the related question, like, have you ever had any of your friends from the UK come visit or be inspired by what you're doing and, really, really try to do something similar? I think you and Dylan, you guys have a lot of tweets where it's like, oh, you can't save anyone. You can't, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Has anyone really taken it seriously though, and got the sort of inner motivation and made a move as well?
No, they think, because they're manipulated in their minds, they think that South America is all mud huts and everyone's running around with guns shooting each other and all this other stuff. They believe that because that's what they're told every single day by the propaganda machine that is the UK. Here's the best
Hmm.
country. Foreigners are swimming here to get in. Oh, it's so great. Your free healthcare. Oh, you're so lucky. Oh, everywhere else in the world is dangerous, but here is safe. Don't worry about the knife attacks in London and the acid attacks and the ridiculous crime rates and everything else. You're living great. And that's what they believe. They believe that in their heart of hearts. And so when I moved to South America, I got laughed at. And let me tell you now, a lot of people will go and get some statistic out or whatever. I've lived it. I have not been robbed once in South America in the nearly 10 years that I've been here. And I was not robbed in Asia for the 4 years in total that I lived there. So it's a complete myth that it's unbelievably dangerous. There are places that are dangerous that bring the statistics up, certain cities,
Hmm.
like say Rio de Janeiro. But if you live in Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and the south of Brazil, you have a much safer existence than you do living in the UK. And I've done both, so I can testify to that.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Maybe one thing that helps is that you don't drink. How long have you not been drinking for?
I realized drinking was a scam. And again, I do drink occasionally. Sometimes I'll have a bit of wine if I'm in an Italian restaurant, or I on flight sometimes I hate turbulence. I'll have a drink just to calm me down. But I don't drink as in, like going out drinking and all that stuff. I realized it was a scam in the UK very early on. I
Hmm.
realized that it's pushed in your face from a young age. Most people don't even really enjoy it. They just think they do. And you start off having a couple of beers on a weekend, and it very quickly turns into getting absolutely blind drunk Friday, blind drunk Saturday, some beers on a barbecue Sunday, and then a couple of beers after work every day. Before you know it, you're an alcoholic, but you're not really an alcoholic because society doesn't label you as one when it should.
Hmm.
So I realized there very quickly that it was a bit of a scam, and I just sort of stayed away from it, which is one of the best things I ever did. And a lot of people say I look younger than my age. I don't know if that's true or not, but I get that a lot, and I believe that's down to clean living, a lot of sun, and no alcohol.
So you're in like your mid 30s now. When you were turning 30, you talk a lot to people in their 20s and inspire them to make mistakes in their 20s. And then I guess you kind of talk a lot to people in their 40s and say, hey, if you're unhappy with your life, um, you know, make a move, stop living in a depressing city. But what about people in their 30s and especially their early 30s? What would your advice be for them?
That's a good one because I don't really give too much advice for that age range. I guess because I'm still figuring it out, maybe. Whereas with the
Hmm.
20s, I saw it myself, and then with the 40s and 50s, I saw it with my dad, so I can kind of help. With 30s, I would just say that if you haven't got your life together in your 30s, that's not great. It's very uncomfortable because people will look at you strange. But fix it if there are any problems, fix them because it only gets harder as you get older. It's okay. When I went to China and I had no money, I looked normal because I was 23 years old. If I went back and did that story again and I'm selling juice nearly at, my mid 30s, I would look weird. I would look out of place. You know what I mean? So I think it's very important to fail quickly and put yourself out there. And then what I would say also to people in their 30s, if you can see yourself going in the direction that my father was in, that sort of direction, if you're in the UK and you see your relationship kind of go that way, make the changes, do the things that
Eject
you
while
need
you
to do.
can before the golden handcuffs get too strong.
Yes, exactly. Before you know it, I've seen it so many times with my dad and UK friends. Before you know it, you're sleeping on the sofa and you're in the doghouse and all this other stuff, which is just completely insane.
Absolutely. Um, So yeah, like we mentioned before, you're one of the only people that I know that spent such a significant amount of time in each of the countries in the southern cone of Latin America in the Mercosur region. I guess there's not enough time to really kind of do a detailed breakdown on all of them. But how do you think about this region, and what do you really enjoy about this region?
I love the attitude of the people. I love the laid back culture. I love the fact that in South America we don't have the sort of manipulation machine that the West has. Where they'll make they'll do some propaganda and everyone will go and they'll change their Twitter bios to it and they'll scream and they'll shout and all this other stuff. And people, Democrats and Republicans, oh, I hate you. Here in America, in South America, they have that stuff to an extent, but it's not as strong. So you can still just be you. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to bow down to these things that they tell you that you have to bow down to, and people don't really care. They're too busy trying to live their lives and feed their kids. They're not really interested in controlling your thoughts and all this other stuff. You know what I mean? People just are
Mhm.
not there yet, which is great. I also love the fact that everything you want is here. Like I said before, seas, lakes, mountains, whatever you're looking for is here. You've got tropical, you've got cold, you've got everything. You know what I mean? You've got incredible
Mhm.
food in Peru. You've got world class steak in Paraguay, Argentina, Uruguay, south of Brazil. You've got amazing seafood in the north of Brazil. You've got great stuff everywhere to enjoy. You know what I mean? You've got dangerous places, unbelievably safe places as well. You've got tax havens. You've got everything. Do you know what I mean? Everything that you could possibly want is here. That's why I haven't really. I went to Europe for a bit as on holiday, but aside from that, I haven't really left because I don't feel the need to.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of the most underrated regions, that Southern Cone. You talked about tax havens briefly. People certainly asked about that in the questions. If you had to redo your whole business setup or redo your life setup in terms of Latin America, what would you do differently?
What do you mean, as in my tax situation?
Yeah, I suppose maybe like the residency or the taxes or where to base up, or maybe I don't know, maybe you've switched accountants a couple times along the way and you've made tweaks here and there.
I was very lucky. I did it perfectly. I mean, I went to Uruguay, and Uruguay took such great care of me. I mean, they had back in 2013, they had secrecy banking. They had, I mean, unbelievable. I remember I went into the tax office. I went to a small town, and this woman said to me, "Oh, I know," because I'd never seen someone like me before because it was a small town. Most people
Hmm.
were doing it in the capital, Montevideo. And she said, "You don't want to pay tax anymore, do you?" I said, "No, no, no." And she said, "Oh, I can help you. You need to do this, this, and this." And she said to me one day, she said, "Lawrence, the UK has called for you twice, asking about you." And I
No
said,
way.
Really? And she said, "Yeah, but I don't tell them anything because I'm not allowed to because they had secrecy banking." I said, "Oh, okay, what do you tell them?" She said, "I just tell them that you're a tax resident of our country and I can't give them any more information at this time." I just thought, you guys are awesome. Honestly, thank you.
Legends.
Legends, honestly. Yeah, shout out to her in the tax office. So it was I did it perfectly. I wouldn't do it again. If I was to do it now, I would probably do Paraguay. But again, Uruguay, if you're moving large sums of money into South America, which I have done over the years, Uruguay is just much more friendly for that. Paraguay has
I,
like
I would agree with
certain
that.
certain limits and things like that. Uruguay, I've moved large sums of money and they've never even batted an eyelid.
How are you preparing for fatherhood, and how do you think that fatherhood's going to change you?
I'm working on every flaw that I have because I want to be the best possible example that I can be. Fortunately, I'm an old bastard now, so any bad habits I had in my 20s and all that failing has turned me into quite a responsible individual now. So I'm quite lucky in that regard.
Hmm.
And I'm just excited for it, really. I mean, first year is going to be difficult, as it is, and it's going to be good. I think as well, I'm very glad that it's happening, now because I can homeschool the child. I can teach the child sales. I can teach the child boxing. I can teach him all these different skills that are really going to help him. And, with the last 2 years as well, teach him not to listen to certain things, do your own, have your own thoughts, think your own things. And yeah, I think that's pretty much how it's going to change me. I'm just working on every little mini flaw I have just so I can be the best example.
All right. I wanted to make a note at this point in the episode that we're actually recording an additional segment later in the day. Lawrence was gracious enough to give us some more time. So if it doesn't flow with the previous hour of the conversation, that's just because we're recording a little bit later in the day, but very gracious of Lawrence to give us another window of time. So appreciate that, Lawrence.
No problem. Happy to be back.
Absolutely. And I'll kick it off with a question about how you had not been back to the UK for close to 10 years. And I believe when you did your little vacation in Spain and Portugal, you did visit London for the first time in a very long time. That must have been sort of a surreal and very interesting moment, right? To sort of revisit your home country.
It was. And to be honest, when I left the UK, I was struggling financially, and now I'm fortunately comfortable financially. So it was a slightly different experience. I got to stay in better hotels, eat better food, and all that stuff. But it was just you could just see how depressing the life was. People running around, scattering around, extremely high cost of living, lots of pressure. Nobody really looked very happy, and the food obviously wasn't very good. And then I was also shocked at how expensive London was. If you live in London and you want to have a very good quality of life, you need to have a lot of money. I put it out on Twitter that you need at least 200,000, and I got I got a bit of hate from people saying, "No, I only make 50,000 and I live well." And it's like, well, you don't really, because you make 200,000, you lose 100,000 pretty much to tax and national insurance, and then if you're left with 8,000 a month, and then you can easily spend £3,000, £4,000 on renting a house, and then you have a few thousand to spend across the month. You're not living really even that well. Then it was quite shocking to see.
And I think one of the things that's cool about Latin America and Geoarbitrage is these small luxuries that technically you could afford in the UK or the US. It just becomes much more accessible in Latin America. For example, having a live in or having a maid, having a chef, getting massages every week, going to top end restaurants, eating steak at restaurants. These are things that even if you could technically afford it in the UK or the US, you'd still kind of feel bad about it, or you'd be like, "This is insane how much I'm spending." But in Latin America, it's just a fraction of the price.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people make the comparison, right? They say, "Oh, but the locals don't earn that much," and all this other stuff. So I guess there's always that, right? But in London, I just remember that when I was a kid, the average person could, with a normal salary, could have a house and live a normal life, and that's just not the case anymore. An average small little house is like £1.5 million, yeah, and salaries haven't really gone up that much, so it's just not the same.
Do you ever think of yourself in the vein of um, the British tradition of Victorian explorers? I'm not sure how much of a fan of history you are, but do you ever go back and read about, um, the Victorian era or different eras of British history and sort of think of yourself in that way at all?
To be honest, no. What I think of is I think you should always go where your best chance of having your best life is. And I will explain that to my children because now Paraguay is having a boom period. South America is having a boom period. Europe
Hmm.
is falling very fast. And to be honest, I think that, you know, just because Paraguay's, people make the mistake of thinking that things are going to be the way they are forever, you know, and Europe is a prime example of that. Dining out on old reputations, making stupid decisions, raising taxes, you know, embracing essentially a form of communism. And then when people have had enough and they move to South America, they just keep going. And you know, because the amount of people that arrived in Paraguay from Germany over the last year, you wouldn't believe it. It's incredible. And just because Paraguay is on the rise now doesn't always mean it is. I mean, I could buy a house and plan a life here, and then in 20 years' time, they do something crazy. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's always best to have your options open and just understand that we live in a world where you can travel anywhere, at the drop of a hat, especially if you've got online income, and go wherever is best for you.
Interesting. Um, of course, I'm very familiar with the "go where you're treated best" idea, but I wanted to just double down on that. And I mean, we have such a long tradition of how, a British guy was the first person to summit Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary, I think. North Pole, South Pole. Long tradition of discovering new lands, discovering the source of the Nile, things like that. Do you think of yourself at all in that sort of poetic way, in a bit of a less logical and a more romantic sense of what it means to be British? Could you ever see yourself moving back there, maybe in like your 60s or something, and joining the clubs on Mayfair and hobnobbing with, I don't know, politicians and stuff like that?
I'm not sure about that, but what I would say is I went back to London for only a few days and I couldn't hack it. I found it very difficult mentally to hack when everything is grey, everybody looks miserable, the food is terrible. Food doesn't. To be honest, I was quite shocked, and when we went back, we could both visually see that the food wasn't really genuinely real. You know, you've traveled yourself. You know, when you go to South America, the flavors of the food taste much. You know, they're much more intense because it's real. It's not fake. It's not some GMO contraption that, some long
Hmm.
life thing full of preservatives and chemicals. It's real food. So when I went
You're
back to
not
the
the first
UK,
person to comment this. We had Francis Amelia on the podcast, another Twitter fitness guy, and he's from Liverpool, and he moved to Venezuela, and he says it's just night and day. It's real food down there in Venezuela, and when his Venezuelan girlfriend came to the UK to visit the family, it was the first thing she noticed was it was just the tomatoes were the wrong color, the meat wasn't the right texture. It just didn't. It just tasted very different. Everything.
exactly that. And shout out to him as well. He's an absolute legend. I love that guy. Great couple as well. Nice, nice, nice couple. It's exactly that. Everyone I know who's gone to the UK said the food doesn't taste of anything. And it's not because of seasoning or whatever. It's just genuinely because the food is not real. So I found it very difficult when I went back. And, I have the money to spend. But at the same time, why would I go to the UK, to London, to live in that sort of misery and spend like £1,000 a day to live in a nice hotel, or, you know, eat out every night the way I want to? I mean, every taxi you get is 40, £50, £30, £50, depending on where you're going. And,
Hmm.
if for me to have the same life of, let's say I was here in Asuncion and I want to live in a five-star hotel. So I go and live in Dazzler or Sheraton, one of the ones on the main strip. It's only going to cost me like 2 grand a month to live in a five-star hotel. Now, let's say I want to eat out every single day and I want to enjoy myself. It's only going to cost me $50 to do that. So now, for $3,500, I'm living in a five-star hotel and I'm eating out every day for lunch and dinner very well. Now, you imagine that in London, a decent hotel, a five-star hotel, is probably £600-700 a night. Then, if I want to go out and eat out every day, you're looking at another few hundred with the taxis and everything else, easily 1,000. So the difference is like 3 to 4,000 to 30 to 40,000, you know, and then what do they offer in exchange? Okay, supposed free healthcare. That's another thing as well. My girlfriend's pregnant. I got the best package for the birth.
Hmm.
5-star level suite, everything taken care of, anything that she needs, she gets. 2,000 and something dollars for the whole thing. You know, it's the whole thing is really, like I was saying earlier in the podcast, it's very much self-marketing. We're the best. You have the best healthcare. Don't leave here. It's fantastic. Everywhere else is dangerous. And as soon as you start unraveling that, you very quickly find out it's not really true. And I don't blame them for doing it. I wouldn't want to lose my taxpayers either. But the reality is far from what they say it is.
I think the one thing that can be said for being in a place like London or Boston or Toronto is that the IQ is generally much higher and that generally people are more successful. They're certainly much more robotic and they all have the sweater vest and basically just look like clones. But in one certain regard, they are more likely to be college educated and just smarter in general. And it can be palpable sometimes. Like when I travel up from Latin America and pop into Boston to see family members and, converse with people that went to Harvard and MIT. I'm kind of like, damn, part of me is like, maybe I should be here so I can be around genuinely smart people that, you know, are really sort of closer to cutting edge innovation in science and technology. How do you think about that?
Um, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't know what to say on that, to be honest. As far as IQs go, I find that it's a very interesting thing because if you go somewhere where there's no education and no TV, they could be considered with a low IQ by an IQ test standards, but they know loads of stuff on how to treat things and all sorts of stuff about the earth and things that we don't really understand. Um, so I find it's very interesting because I remember when I first went traveling, I had my own perspective of what life should be like and what is the done thing. And since traveling for nearly 2 decades now, my worldview is completely different of what an IQ even is.
There's certainly different types of intelligence. I think mastering your body, be it through dance or through martial arts, is certainly a way. I think people in Latin America definitely have much better social intelligence and just know how to behave better. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the traditional IQ test really is, it's what they say it is. But I think I think one thing that's important in life is always look at results because we get very tied down in belief systems. And I try not to do that. I try to look at who's winning. If
Hmm.
people are living to 120 in some tribe somewhere, what are they doing? How are they doing that? You know what I mean?
Steak.
Yeah, I mean, or whatever it is, right? And like, if people are making millions, how are they doing it? If people are driving a really nice car, how are they doing it? If people, have really good, physiques, how are they doing it? Do you know what I mean? Like, I kind of look at life like that. Like, who has the results?
Mhm.
Opinions and belief sets really don't matter. It's who's winning at the end of it all.
Who are some of your biggest influences? Like who, if they put out an article or an interview, etc., will you stop everything and read their material? Or who have been some of your historically been some of your big influences or the people that you've sort of modeled yourself after?
Um, Nobody famous, I would say. Very few famous people. It's mostly people I've met that I see are winning, and I find out what they're doing, and I ask them questions, and I tend to take their views a lot more seriously. But there aren't too many people that I sort of listen to on sort of everything, or I'd stop what I'm doing. It's quite interesting, that question. I never really thought about it, but there aren't really.
And I had a question for you about language learning. Um, I think my understanding is your Spanish is definitely pretty good, and your Portuguese as well. What part of how big of a role has that played in your journey learning the local language?
It's massive. And I often get asked this question on Twitter. Oh, I want to move to South America. Do I have to learn Spanish? And I think, what are you doing? Like, of course you should learn Spanish. I recommend the Pimsleur program for anybody that does want to learn a language. I speak 4 languages fluently. and every single one bar English was learnt via the Pimsleur program. Um, for me, it was CDs that I learned these language on. Now it would be some sort of app, but I definitely recommend the Pimsleur program. The FBI
What's the
use it.
fourth? Is it Italian?
Yes.
And I guess you would rank them like Spanish best, Portuguese second best, Italian third.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And like I imagine you're quite good. Like when you're strolling around Paraguay and Uruguay, are you primarily able to speak to Spanish and people? I guess you don't go to the bar much, but if you go strike up conversations with people at the bar or things like that, you can totally get through like hour-long conversations joking around in Spanish and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm completely fluent. And to be honest, it's been so long now that I should be. I mean, it's been nearly 10 years.
Hmm.
So I've almost spent, a third of my life speaking Spanish now. So yeah, it's very easy. But I recommend anyone that does come and wants to learn. I would say the Pimsleur program gives you a good enough base where you can have sort of conversations. And the next thing you have to practice and listen and really immerse yourself. I was quite lucky because when I went to Venezuela, nobody spoke English. Nobody had ever seen an Englishman. So I was forced to learn. If I wanted to sell that juice, I had to learn. And on my first day of selling juice, all I could really say was juice and the price.
Juguito.
Yeah. Jugo de caña, guarapo de caña, cinco bolívares. That's all I could really say. And if they tried to have any sort of conversation with me, I couldn't really talk to them. And, from being the best thing you can always do, people's biggest problem is they always want a course for something or a life hack that's going to save them lots of time. When in reality, that ends up taking all their time because they do all these courses and they try for these hacks. When really, if you just really immersed yourself into something, you would learn extremely quickly, whatever it is. It would be like trying to drive a car, but only doing courses and then planning on driving the car. And then next year on January 1st, I'll start driving cars. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't really make sense.
Was learning the languages a big motivation for your travels? Did you travel in order to learn, or was it just sort of a byproduct or thing you had to do?
It was a byproduct of just leaving the UK. I mean, the goal has always been leave the UK at any cost. And if I had to learn another language, I was prepared to do that just to get out of
Hmm.
there.
But you did, you were moving around every couple months. You went all over the Southern Cone, visiting all the different countries. What motivated you to do that? Because there's lots of people. I have tons of friends. They flew to their first destination in Mexico and they just stayed in that spot for years. And so not
Wow.
everyone necessarily, once they find something better than their home country, is jumping around a lot. Were you interested in the nature and doing dope shit in nature, or just kind of like what kind of motivated you to keep exploring?
Well, I think it's very important to know all your options. If a country that you're living
Mm,
in does something crazy, like, I don't know, lock down the entire economy for 2 years, and you want to go somewhere where there's a bit more freedom, then you want to know where's good. And you want to have a list. Like, I've always got a list of backup places, and I've got a list of places. I like to travel depending on what I'm doing. So when I lived in Uruguay, I would go to Colonia for deep work, for example, and then I would go to Punta del Este for the beach in the summer, and then I'd go up to Brazil when it was cold. You know what I mean? So I kind of had a tactical approach to where I'm
hmm.
living and what I'm doing. And I think if you're traveling as well, one thing I'd like to suggest for people that are looking into the digital nomad life is to not travel like too much, like every 3, 4 days change city, and then also just plan for a deep work period. I have my cities where I know they're not too crazy, they're nice and chill, and I can go there and do some deep work if needs be, and get that deep work out the way, and then go and travel again.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. That was actually an excellent answer. You basically travel to expand your options. And so I imagine you just have a list of cities that you think are going to be cool, that you think you're going to enjoy, and you're almost basically doing scouting missions.
Exactly. And like I say, in this world now, it's extremely difficult to plan anything. I mean, we just saw over the last 2 years. I mean, they were like Germany. They were measuring people in the streets, and they were kicking people's doors in for celebrating Christmas in the UK. I mean, it's very hard to plan on where you're going to be for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years now. You could do that 30 years ago. It's very hard to do that now. So you want to know all your options, what the banking system's like, how good is the food, could you stay there for 3 months if things go crazy? It's very good to have those sort of options. And I've got a massive array of cities and countries where I can go, a few different residencies. I'm working on the passports as well, try and get more passports. And, you need that in this day and age. You really do.
So, what are your top cities? You can feel free to keep a couple off the records that you don't want to share, but what are some of your top cities, and then what utility do those particular cities have?
Okay, so I would say Buenos Aires is a good city right now. It's fun, it's very cheap. I like Colonia in Uruguay. It's a very chill place. It's very, built by Swiss colonists. It's a beautiful place, very chill. So I like that for deep work. In Brazil, if I'm going to the beach or something, I really like Maragogi, and which is just south of Recife. Really safe, unbelievable beaches, tropical, just great. Um, Florianopolis in the south of Brazil as well, Balneario, which I prefer, which is next to it.
Hmm.
Asuncion is also a nice city. It depends. Like I know a lot of foreigners that come here and they want something a bit more. It's a small city here. It's almost like a town, almost. So people sometimes want a bit more fun. But Asuncion's a nice chill place. The north of Chile I also quite like as well. South of Chile is very beautiful. So I would say those are probably my favorite kind of places in Gramado in Brazil as well. Those are pretty much my favorite. Arequipa in Peru as well is very nice, especially for deep work. So those are probably my sort of go-to places.
Do you find in Brazil you're able to do any deep work anywhere, or is that the recreation spots?
Gramado is a very good place if you're looking to do deep work. If
Yeah,
you haven't
for
seen
sure.
Gramado, if you're listening
But
to this
other
now,
but anywhere on the beach, anywhere anywhere on the
yeah,
beach.
no, but beach you still can, but yeah, like check out Gramado. Honestly, if you're listening to this, you won't believe what Gramado looks like. It's incredible. Google it once you've listened to this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Beautiful, very safe. And then on the beach, yeah, I mean it depends where you are. Like I'm not a big fan of Rio. I didn't like Rio very much. Didn't feel safe, and very similar to the UK. If you don't feel safe somewhere, it's hard to enjoy it. Um, but yeah, the Maragogi is very, very safe. Nothing happens there, and I strongly recommend anyone who wants to go for a nice tropical beach vacation to check it out.
And when you're trying to go to the south of Brazil from Uruguay, are you taking a bus or are you flying?
I'd fly that, yeah, for sure.
Not a bus guy.
I mean, if you did a bus from Asuncion to the beach in Brazil,
No,
you'd be looking at
Uruguay
like
from like Montevideo to Porto Alegre or something.
that's still like 25 hours because it's so big, right? It's not like Europe where you can be in one country to another in a couple of hours. It's massive. I think the bus from I've done the bus once. I think from Porto Alegre to Montevideo to Porto Alegre, and it was like 20 hours.
Okay, damn.
Yeah,
I'm
something like
looking
that.
it up.
And they've got nice buses here, right? So people are hearing this and thinking bus and thinking of something really, they've got nice seats, like the equivalent of business class on a plane. That's what they've got on the buses here. But it's still 20 hours, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Brazil has a really good bus culture, and I think a lot of South America as well. It's not like a Greyhound in the States. It's quite a bit nicer than that.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
What are your thoughts on gringos in general? And do you try to avoid gringo heavy cities, or are you as repulsed by them as Jake Nomada, or are you generally okay with them?
The thing is, I don't know. I'm happy for anyone that discovers South America. I'm happy for you. If you are living in Ohio and that's your reality, no offense to Ohio, but you know what I mean, or Detroit or whatever, and you discover that you can fly 4 hours down south and live in a tropical paradise and enjoy your life, I'm happy for you. I'm genuinely happy for you because I did the same thing. So I would never begrudge anyone for doing what I've done. But at the same time, I do try and avoid cities where it's just mass gringos. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because it's almost like it's kind of like Thailand in Asia, where Bangkok is just full of foreigners and it kind of loses its authenticity. I quite like places like Asuncion that still have their culture and very authentic cities and are not overrun by tourism.
Definitely. Are you able to talk about residencies and passports at all, or because I
Yeah,
know you're open about it, some people aren't.
yeah, I'm more than happy to. I mean, I can't give financial advice, but yeah, I'm more than happy to discuss that. No problem. I mean, being from the UK is fantastic because you can leave and your passport is strong, and the UK government doesn't come after you for tax once you've left
Hmm.
after 6 months. They
Right.
they accept the fact that they've lost. Now, the USA will tax you regardless. Double taxation is in place. So very lucky we don't have that. And I don't want to, disrupt that situation by becoming a Paraguayan and maybe they decide to tax me or something like that. So it's very easy actually I mean, I saw someone, I mean, this is not advice, but I saw someone say something extremely true the other day that you can literally overstay your visa in a country, and because you're on a tourist visa, you don't owe them tax in certain situations. So there's so many different ways around these systems that people aren't even aware of.
Yeah, I think that was my tweet.
That was yours. Okay, awesome. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was yours. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was you.
It
Yeah.
was like the Eddie Murphy thinking meme, and it was like, if I just overstay by 2 years, I only pay $100 fine on exit.
Yeah, and that's exactly true, right? Like that's 100% true. They won't come for income tax during that time. So
Hmm.
because you were not an official citizen, so and then again, it's so there's lots of different ways around these things, and I think people from America and the UK, we kind of think of everything as this is how it is, and then when you start traveling, you realize and you get that sort of because again, in the UK or Canada or America, if you want to break the rules, you need to be in the top 1%, and they'll allow you to break the rules. When you start traveling, the game gets much fairer very fast.
Yeah, definitely a Tate principle right there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he says that exactly, and it's 100% true.
Yeah, and
It's
also you don't know everything about these other systems until you start on the path, and basically what happens is the options and possibilities open to you while you're already on the path, but you won't know unless you start.
exactly, yeah, exactly that, and it's really eye opening. And at first, you kind of go, "Wow, this is crazy. This is corruption. I can't believe it," because you've never seen it before. Because the only people that will have seen it are the mega rich in your country, and then suddenly you're in a position where you can buy your freedom.
Hmm. And
During
just to double down for it, obviously Americans tax on worldwide taxation, but yeah, I mean, I think it's very helpful to any listeners that are from non-USA, Canadian listeners, UK, Australia, mainland Europe listeners, etc., to just know that you can break your tax residency in your home country. You can get set up somewhere else, and I think that's been one of the things that's helped you grow a lot on Twitter and with your brand is that you're one of the few people that's been so candid and open about this and inspiring people and just basically helping give people the permission to do it themselves because they can say, hey, if Lawrence did it, that's just a really good anecdote.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one thing I will always say is since opening a Twitter account, from Twitter alone, I've generated millions of dollars over the 2, 3 years I've been on it, which is nice. But it's nowhere near as nice as the handful of people that say, "Hey, I moved to a tax haven. Thank you. I'm no longer paying tax and I love my life." Or the people that say, "Yeah, I was in a very similar relationship to your dad with Big Susan. I made the decision to leave. I'm now in Thailand. I'm having the time of my life." And it's those people that I might have helped during my 2, 3 years that really I'll remember, when it's all said and done.
What are some of the things that you're most proud of about your journey so far?
I'm very proud of the fact that as a scared 18, 20, 21, 22-year old boy, I took the risks and I just went with it, and I rode things out, and I made decisions that were tough. It would have been very easy for 19-year-old me to be sat in an office in the UK doing the rat race, squeezing into the metro, the subway, as you would call it in America, going to my job, hating my life, getting myself a big Susan, and living my life that way. But the fact that 18-year-old me had the balls to get a backpack and €1,000 and go to Italy and decide that that was it, I'm very proud of that, because I'm very proud of him, because a lot of people in their 40s, 50s are scared to make that jump. You know, even when they've got money, I get people who say, "I'm retired now, but I'm so worried. I want to go to Paraguay, but I don't even know where to start." 18 years old, backpack, never look back, and that's been a that's been something that kind of helped me, because if you I didn't have internet money young like a lot of these young guys do now, which I'm very jealous of, because if I'd had that as well, I would have been unstoppable.
Hmm.
But being able to make those mistakes and take those risks enabled me to be comfortable in my 30s, and that's priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way where I feel like I got into it just maybe like 5 years too late, and how much I would have been crushing it if I got the poison out a couple of years earlier.
Well, at least you're here. You know what I mean? That's the main thing. It's better to understand that you're here now. Some people never make it, you know. And it's very sad. I mean, my dad, he thought everything was normal until he was nearly 60. And then that's when he went, I'm not doing this anymore. Do you know what I mean? That was his breaking point, 60. Imagine if his breaking point had been 40 instead. You know what I mean? But it's better that it at least happens instead of never happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're the founder of Raging Bull Coffee, a brand of extremely strong coffee. uh, that and you basically put together this company, um, and a lot of my understanding is a lot of like the packaging and distribution and stuff happens in the States. What was it like to build this sort of US based company from abroad, especially like a physical product where you got to source the beans somehow, you got to, I don't know, get it all packaged up, you got to bring it warehouses, this and that. What was that experience like?
Well, it was the only difficulty was that it was during COVID that I launched that brand. Um, so it took ages. It took so long to get it off the ground. But other than that, it's been smooth sailing. It's got a lot of customers over the last year and a half. People enjoy it, and it's got very good reviews and everything else. So I'm definitely going to be taking that brand and growing it out. I've had some difficulty with Amazon as well. I got suspended on my final account, so it's been kind of difficult getting another one back open. But I will figure that out and grow that out on Amazon as well. And if you like strong coffee, definitely give it a try. And so the beans are a mix of African and Colombian, and it's freshly roasted when you order. So we freshly roast the beans when you order them. So when they arrive to you, literally the mailmen say that, "Wow, I can't believe how good this smells," because it's literally just been roasted the day before. So it's not like supermarket coffee where it might have been roasted 3, 4 months ago. It's freshly roasted the day before.
That's a hell of a pitch. And are you shipping internationally or just the States?
Just the States, unfortunately. I'd love to ship internationally, but it's too much hassle from the United States. People are going to have to spend $30 extra to get their coffee, and it's just not viable.
Okay, so I have an idea for you, Lawrence. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for it.
Let's start a yerba mate brand, our own brand of yerba mate in Paraguay. We're
In
gonna we're
Paraguay?
gonna sor- yeah, we're gonna source it down in the Encarnacion area. We're gonna, uh, get a logo somehow, maybe from the same guys as Raging Bull. We're gonna, find a manufacturer, and we're gonna perhaps export it. Maybe drop ship it or sell it on Amazon, drop ship it, whatever, FBA it in the States, in the UK. Who knows? Because all I know, maybe this will inspire you to look at it afterwards, is that like a half kilo of yerba mate in the US or Canada is like $20. And as you probably know, in Paraguay, it's like $1.50. And so I feel like there's a bit of margin there.
I mean, we can definitely look at that at some point for sure.
What would that look like if I can get some free game real quick? What would that look like to
I'm,
put together a
I,
company like that?
I mean, there's a lot better brand people out there than me. I mean, I wouldn't even know where. I'd have to look at that. I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, I use suppliers in the United States for my coffee that already imported, and I was able to get facilities and everything else. But yeah, for that, I wouldn't even know where to start, to be honest.
Okay, well, I'm just planting the seeds of an idea.
Okay,
Maybe when I get down to Paraguay, we'll talk more about it. I'm definitely I'm
absolutely.
hoping to be down maybe by maybe for you'll be there for Carnival hopefully
Yeah, I'm not leaving.
in
I'm
February.
going to be here. I'm here permanently now, so I'm not leaving.
That's awesome, man. Dude, the squad in Paraguay is growing rapidly. Oh, one last question. I got asked this. Over the years, you must have met a lot of the guys off Twitter in person. What have been some of your favorite memorable meetups, and who have you met over the years?
Well, definitely Dylan Madden. I've traveled to many countries with him. I've also met. I mean, I met a lot of everyone I met from Twitter was great. I met Nima in London. He was awesome. I met. I met Scott in Medellin, and a couple other guys as well. I was in a restaurant here the other night in Asuncion, and there was a group of followers on the table next to me that had moved to Paraguay upon my recommendation. So I see a lot of people that follow me on Twitter, which is great. I'm very happy for them. I always am. If you've moved from, like I keep saying, if you've moved from somewhere like Germany or the UK and you now live in a sunny place, with great food and a much better dating culture, then I'm over the moon for you. So yeah, not too many sort of influencers from Twitter, but I've met a lot of people that follow, which I always appreciate.
And we met briefly one time.
And we met as well, yes. Yeah,
Well, good luck to you in this upcoming summer in Asuncion. It's usually a hot one. Hopefully, you make it out to San Bernardino or somewhere to pass it with ease.
absolutely. I'm sure I will.
And yeah, thank you so much for joining us on this episode, man. Hopefully, this appearance will help you rank above Larry King, the American TV announcer, when it comes to SEO.
Hopefully, here's hoping.
But yeah, man, thank you so much for your time. Certainly appreciate it. I know the fans are gonna love this one. Would you like to shout out, I guess, your Twitter handle and anything else that you'd like to promote?
Yeah, one thing I'd love to shout out is my Instagram. It's at Lawrence King. Yes, I'm trying to grow that out. I'm posting a lot more lifestyle content over there. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, please do. I'd be very grateful. And shout out to you guys as well. You've been growing your account for a long time. I've seen you around the space. Always good, bringing awareness to Latin America and showing just how good it is, breaking some of the stereotypes, the unjust stereotypes. And thanks very much for having me on.